I got this plane at a flea market some years ago. I didn't know what kind it was at the time since it didn't have any markings. The iron says Defiance, which I originally misread as Defiant, and hence I couldn't find any information on it. The Defiance line, from what I understand, is a tertiary line of planes made and sold by Stanley during the Depression years. I've read it was aimed at the occasional user, possibly on a farm in rural America. Okay, so let's try to get some context. I don't know who owns this page, but my sincere thanks go to him. I think I was directed here through a hand-plane Facebook group, but it's a wonderful resource for somebody interested in old hand planes. If we go right here to this one, this is Stanley Tools 1934, which gets us pretty close, middle of the Great Depression. And if we scroll down here to the hand planes, I have to get past the rulers and levels. Here we are, Stanley bench planes. There's some descriptions of them. And if we blow this page up gently, we can see that the Stanley number 4 is retailing for $4.20. And if we go down a little further, we'll find the Bedrocks right here on the next page. And the 604 was retailing for $4.65. So one thing to take away from this, the Bedrock is 45 cents more than the Bailey, and the Bailey is $4.20, so the Bedrock is 11% more expensive than the Bailey. Unfortunately, I've never seen any pricing for a Defiance hand plane, and it doesn't seem to be in this catalog. If anybody has any pricing, would be curious to know. And I'm not even sure what year my Defiance is. I've never seen a type study described on it. But let's just use these 1934 prices for reference. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't know what the real price of $2 in the mid-1930s is, so why don't we dig a little deeper? Let's go to this website, Prices and Wages by Decade. I think this is from the Bureau of Labor and Statistics. This particular site is University of Missouri, and I thank them for putting this information on the web. Starting wages for common labor is 1935. And what they give you here is, this is the various wage breaks as you go from 17.5 cents an hour up to 87 cents an hour. And again, this is starting wages. They break it up into 3 categories, basically the entire U.S., the North, and the South is over here. And they give you the number of laborers, which I don't find interesting. Simple percentage, which again is not interesting, but the cumulative percentage gives you an idea of where the median is. Where these two numbers cross 50, so in this particular, for the cumulative United States, these two rows, about 42 to 64, right about in the middle of here is where the 50th percentile is. And that's 42.5 cents to 47.5 cents. In the middle of that is 45 cents. So the entire U.S., the median wage was about 45 cents an hour. And curiously, if you go to the north and you do the same thing, you find out that the 50th percentile is a little higher, closer to the 47, maybe 46 cents an hour. And in the south, the 50th percentile is right here, which if you trace it over is only 32.5 cents an hour. So apparently wages were lower in the south, and presumably the cost of living was commensurately lower. But that gives you an idea of how much people starting out were making. And if you were going to buy a hand plane, you'd be looking at somewhere around 9 to 10 hours of your labor to buy a number 4 or Bedrock 604. Now if we go to this table, Handbook of Labor and Statistics, this is wages, hours, and earnings by occupation. And this will give you more of an average, not just a starting wage, but what the average person was making. And the building trades, wages, rates, and hours, 1936 right here is on page 52. Average union and non-union hourly wages, selected occupations in the building trades in 1936. But let's just look at carpenters, which is the second row. The average across the entire country was just a little over $1.05. If you were union, it was 10 cents more, $1.15 an hour. And if you were non-union, actually 20 cents, about 80 cents an hour lower. And I can't vouch for the accuracy. Somebody in a building trade with a fair amount of experience was making more or less $1 an hour. So to go out and buy a Stanley Bailey number 4 would be a little over 4 hours of your labor, and a Bedrock would be, again, a little bit more than that. Let me take a minute to explain what I know about the retail manufacturing industry. let's just say you're making some sort of widget, and there's a widget that's very useful. And inside of that widget, you have all sorts of parts and pieces that go into it. And these parts and pieces are known as a bill of materials, or it's known as the BOM. And then that BOM goes off to a factory. And in the factory, you have manufacturing costs. And then these make their way to a wholesaler, to a retailer, to the consumer. And in my experience, if you have $1 bill of material cost, that generally translates into $2 manufacturing costs, which translates $4 to the consumer retail price. So the Bedrock 604 was $4.65, and the Stanley Bailey number 4 was $4.20. This delta was 45 cents, or about 11%. And then we have the Defiance 1204, and that is the big question mark. And my guess would be that from the Bailey to the Defiance, you're probably looking at another 10% or so, and that would put this number around 380. And again, this is a guess. About 10% over the Bailey, which translates into about 40 cents. This is at retail, so that puts you at about 20 cents manufacturing and at about 10 cents for the bill of materials. And just realize there are other manufacturing costs that can be saved that are not related to bill of materials, but if you can actually eliminate parts in your bill of materials, then you're going to save manufacturing costs. And I would venture to say that my analysis here is probably a little bit optimistic toward our ancestors in the 1930s, meaning I think it was actually worse than I've depicted. And the reason is people alive today are much wealthier than most people alive in the 1930s in the United States and all over the world. And people today have a lot more disposable income than the average Joe back in the 1930s had. So 4 or 5 hours of labor or 10 or 12 hours of labor was probably a lot harder for somebody in the 1930s to fork over for something like a hand plane. So it appears to me that hand planes in the 1930s were probably on par with buying something like a benchtop planer today, or maybe even a decent benchtop planer today. So I don't think Stanley could save 10 cents on the bill of materials. That seems optimistic to me. I think most of their savings probably came from the manufacturing segment and the margin that they decided to put on the retail price. And for manufacturing, you can save costs by using lesser quality manufacturing techniques, less time on the buffing machine, less time on the shaping machines, accepting poorer quality castings, for example, and perhaps they even had the manufacturing done at a less expensive manufacturing site than where they had the Baileys done. If I had to guess, I think they probably saved 2 to 3 cents in the bill of materials, and the rest of it would come from manufacturing and margin. And maybe the Defiance was only 5% cheaper, so instead of trying to save 40 cents in retail, maybe it was only 20 cents. But in any case, the question is, where did Stanley look to save? And the first thing you notice is in the woodwork. Instead of rosewood, these are hardwood. It was obviously cheaper than rosewood, else Stanley would have used the rosewood. The second thing you notice is depth adjustment knob is made of steel, and it's a smaller knob, clearly not as expensive as the original brass. The lateral adjuster is a one-piece folded steel design. These things so far, although they're a little cheaper, are not going to give you the savings that I've been talking about, because although this is a less expensive part, it still needs to be assembled at the factory. Finally, one area that does save is there's no frog adjustment mechanism in this plane. And the lack of these 3 pieces would result in the savings that we're talking about, because these 2 pieces, the screw and the tab, have to be machined to pretty tight tolerances. But on top of that, there's additional factory operations. There's the drilling and tapping of these 2 holes. That does not have to be done on the Defiance. There's no model number or size or brand cast into the body of the frog, and also nothing like that on the lever cap. And on the lateral adjuster, there's no such numbering stamped into it. And those things would certainly make for an easier post-processing step, possibly a higher yield because of less failures. And I don't know this for a fact, but I wouldn't be surprised if there were other corners cut in other areas. For example, this Japanning might not be nearly as well as that which was done on a Stanley Bailey or a Bedrock. Also, quality control, quality assurance, perhaps on the Defiance line, certain defects and deformities and imperfections For example, on the frog here, I mean, this casting looks pretty mediocre. This piece may very well have been rejected on a Bailey or a bedrock, where for a Defiance they would let it slide through. So let me know what you think. Do you think 40 cents is the right number? Hey, let me know in the comment section. I'd love to hear what you think about my analysis, if it holds any water. And thanks for stopping by my shop. Look forward to seeing you all on the next one.